Have you ever wondered why some people seem to find healthy relationships effortlessly, while others keep reliving the same story of disappointment, abandonment, and unrequited love, even when they give their very best? What if I told you that the problem was never the lack of the right person, your appearance, or your worth, but an invisible part of your mind that makes choices for you before you even realize it? Carl Jung believed that what remains unconscious directs our lives, and we end up calling the result fate. When it comes to love, this idea becomes even more powerful. You may be searching for a healthy, mutual, and lasting relationship, yet without realizing it, you continue to be guided by the same emotional patterns that lead you straight back to the kind of person who hurts you the most. Most people believe that attracting true love depends on finding someone compatible, learning the right dating techniques, or simply waiting for the right moment. But what if that belief is exactly what keeps you trapped in the same cycle? What if, before finding someone who truly loves you, there is a far more important journey you need to take: developing yourself? Not just by improving your habits or boosting your self-esteem on the surface, but by transforming the way your unconscious mind understands love, affection, and your own sense of worth. This is one of the deepest insights of Carl Jung's analytical psychology, and it may be the missing piece you've been searching for to understand why certain relationships enter your life, and why others never last. In this video, you'll discover 5 steps to develop yourself and attract a healthy, mutual, and lasting relationship, inspired by the principles of Carl Jung's psychology. But pay close attention, these are not ordinary relationship tips or motivational phrases that inspire you for a few days and then fade away. Each step reveals a psychological mechanism that works quietly within you, shaping your choices, your emotions, and even the way other people respond to your presence. The more you understand these mechanisms, the more you'll realize that the love you're searching for in the outside world begins to be built long before that, within yourself. You may discover that what you were really seeking wasn't love, but approval. That what you truly missed wasn't another person, but a part of yourself that had remained hidden for years. You may even realize that what you called chemistry was actually an unconscious repetition of old emotional wounds. And that realization has the power to completely transform the way you see your relationships from this moment forward. Perhaps the most fascinating part is that Jung never believed we were doomed to repeat these patterns forever. On the contrary, he believed that every human being has the capacity to awaken, integrate their shadow, develop their authentic identity, and build a far more conscious life. And that is exactly where everything begins to change. Because there is an enormous difference between desperately searching for someone to fill your inner emptiness and becoming so emotionally whole that you naturally attract relationships built on respect, mutuality, and emotional maturity. But before you can understand how this transformation happens, you first need to recognize a mistake that almost everyone makes without realizing it, a mistake that keeps so many people choosing the very individuals who will never be able to offer the love they are truly looking for. Before we continue, I'd like to invite you to do something. If this topic has already resonated with you, take a moment to like this video. That simple action tells YouTube that this message deserves to reach other people who may also be trapped in painful relationship patterns and need to hear what you're about to discover. I'd also love to hear your story. Leave a comment below. Have you ever felt that no matter who you date, you keep repeating the same relationship patterns? Or simply write, "I choose to change," if you've decided to break this cycle and begin a new chapter of self-discovery. I read many of your comments, and they are a powerful reminder that none of us has to go through this journey alone. Now, stay with me until the very end, because each step builds on the one before it. If you miss even one of them, you could miss the very insight that explains why your relationships have followed the same path, and, more importantly, how you can finally change that reality. There is one question that almost no one has the courage to ask themselves: what if the biggest obstacle to experiencing a healthy relationship isn't the people you've met, but the version of yourself that keeps making the same choices without even realizing it? That idea can be uncomfortable because it's much easier to believe the problem has always been someone else. After all, we've all created stories to explain our heartbreak, only attract the wrong people. No one wants a serious relationship anymore, or true love doesn't exist anymore. After so many painful experiences, those beliefs seem to make perfect sense. But Carl Jung invites us to look much deeper. He once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." And perhaps the same is true of what attracts us. Take a moment to think about the people who have left the deepest mark on your life. Even if they looked completely different, had different careers, or very different personalities, was there an invisible thread connecting them all? Maybe they were emotionally unavailable. Maybe they always needed to be rescued. Maybe they made you constantly fight for their attention, affection, or approval. At first glance, it may seem like nothing more than coincidence. But from the perspective of analytical psychology, repeated coincidences are rarely just coincidences. More often, they are manifestations of unconscious patterns still searching for resolution. This is exactly where many people begin to wake up. They realize they were never simply looking for someone to love. Without knowing it, they were looking for someone who would confirm what they already believed about themselves. Someone who secretly feels they have to prove their worth is often drawn to people who are difficult to win over. Someone who learned early in life that love requires sacrifice may mistake suffering for passion. And someone who grew up believing they were never enough often settles for emotional breadcrumbs, convinced that even the smallest sign of affection is something they should be grateful for. Jung believed that whatever remains unconscious continues to shape our choices. That is why so many people promise themselves they will never repeat the same story, only to find themselves, months later, standing in front of someone who awakens the very same wounds. The face is different. The name is different. The circumstances are different. Yet the feeling is strangely familiar. And perhaps the most fascinating part is that this familiarity is often mistaken for a deep connection. Some call it fate. Others call it chemistry. But in many cases, it is simply the unconscious recognizing an old wound. Once you understand this, the way you see love begins to change completely. Instead of asking, "Why does this always happen to me?" you begin asking, "What part of me still believes this kind of relationship is normal?" That shift in perspective is incredibly powerful because it restores responsibility without turning you into the one to blame. You didn't choose your wounds, but you can choose not to let them continue making your decisions. And that may be the difference between remaining trapped by the past and beginning the true process of individuation, one of the central concepts in Carl Jung's work, in which you stop living according to inherited fears, expectations, and emotional patterns, and finally begin building an authentic, conscious identity. When that process begins, something remarkable happens. You start noticing warning signs you once ignored, behaviors you used to excuse, and emotions you once confused with love. It's as if a light suddenly turns on inside your own mind, revealing that many of the answers you had been searching for in other people were actually hidden within a part of yourself you had never truly explored. And it is precisely at this point that an even more unsettling discovery begins to emerge, because there is a silent psychological mechanism that can create an almost irresistible attraction to certain people, even when they represent exactly the kind of person most likely to hurt you. If this reflection resonated with you, leave a comment below with the words, "I choose awareness." That simple declaration could mark the beginning of a far greater transformation than you can imagine. This is precisely the mechanism that leads most people to believe they're following their heart, when in reality they're simply obeying invisible patterns that were formed long before they ever met the person they fell in love with. This is one of Carl Jung's most surprising psychological insights. We like to believe that we choose our relationships consciously, by evaluating compatibility, shared values, and life goals. But before reason even has a chance to step in, the unconscious has already begun making silent associations. It searches for what feels familiar, not necessarily for what is healthy. And there is a profound difference between those two things. That's why someone can meet a kind, emotionally available person who genuinely wants to build a healthy relationship, yet still feel as though something is missing. At the same time, they may encounter someone who is unpredictable, emotionally distant, or difficult to win over and experience an overwhelming attraction that's almost impossible to explain. Many people mistake that intensity for proof of true love. Jung saw it differently. He believed that whenever an emotion appears with disproportionate intensity, projection is often taking place. You're not simply seeing the person standing in front of you, you are seeing unconscious parts of your own psyche reflected in them. This phenomenon is known as projection, one of the most important concepts in analytical psychology. We project onto others the desires, fears, expectations, and unmet needs that we have not yet recognized within ourselves. That is why so many love stories begin with the feeling that we've finally found the perfect person. In reality, what we often find is a blank screen onto which our minds project everything they long to complete. The problem is that no one can carry an identity that was never truly theirs. When the projection begins to fade, disappointment inevitably follows, not because love has disappeared, but because fantasy is slowly giving way to reality. Carl Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Few statements capture the nature of relationships more accurately. How many people say they always attract cold, controlling, or emotionally unavailable partners without realizing that a deeply rooted belief is quietly guiding those choices? Not because they consciously want to suffer, but because the unconscious has learned to associate that kind of relationship dynamic with love itself. What is familiar creates a false sense of safety, even when it causes pain. Perhaps that's why breaking these patterns feels so incredibly difficult. It isn't enough to decide intellectually that things will be different from now on. You must first recognize which parts of your identity still believe they have to earn love through effort, self-sacrifice, or the constant need to please others. As long as those parts remain hidden, they will continue shaping every new connection, every expectation, and every relationship that enters your life. And it is precisely here that we begin to understand why true personal growth is about far more than learning new habits or boosting self-esteem. It requires exploring a much deeper dimension of the mind, where the aspect Jung called the shadow resides. And within that shadow may be the very key to completely transforming the way you love, and the way you allow yourself to be loved. If this idea resonated with you, leave a comment below with the words, "I choose to see beyond appearances." Sometimes, transformation begins the moment we give a name to what was once invisible. This is exactly why Carl Jung devoted so many years to studying the shadow. When we hear that word, it's common to think only of our flaws, fears, or negative impulses. But the shadow is far more complex than that. It represents every part of ourselves that has been hidden, rejected, or repressed throughout our lives because, at some point, we believed those parts would not be accepted. Perhaps you learned that expressing your needs was a sign of weakness. Maybe you buried your sadness to appear strong, or silenced your own voice to avoid conflict. Over time, those parts don't disappear, they simply fall outside of your conscious awareness. And what is repressed doesn't lose its power. On the contrary, it continues to quietly shape the way we think, feel, and make choices. This is where one of the greatest traps in relationships begins. Whatever you fail to recognize within yourself often appears in the person who captures your attention. Someone who suppresses their own sensitivity may feel an almost irresistible admiration for a deeply emotional person. Someone who hides their need for security may be drawn to someone who seems strong, decisive, and dominant. And those who never learn to value themselves often fall in love with people whose approval seems impossible to earn. Not because those individuals are their perfect match, but because they embody inner qualities that have not yet been integrated. Jung believed that the process of individuation, the true path of personal growth, requires the courage to look inward. It isn't enough to change surface-level behaviors or repeat positive affirmations in front of a mirror. Real transformation begins when you start acknowledging the very things you've spent years avoiding. And this stage is often uncomfortable because it means letting go of the stories that gave meaning to your suffering. Many people build their identity around the belief that they were born to take care of others, rescue relationships, or endure everything in the name of love. When those beliefs begin to be questioned, a strange feeling emerges, as though a part of your identity itself is beginning to disappear. Perhaps you've experienced this without even realizing it. Maybe you met someone who was genuinely emotionally available, only to lose interest almost immediately. Or perhaps you found yourself suspicious of someone simply because they treated you with respect, honesty, and emotional stability. It sounds contradictory, yet it happens far more often than most people realize. A brain conditioned to chaos can mistake peace for boredom. A mind trained by insecurity can interpret emotional stability as indifference. And without realizing it, you end up rejecting the very thing you've always said you wanted. There is a quote attributed to Jung that captures this process beautifully: "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." In other words, a healthy relationship is not born simply from the desire to love. It grows out of the willingness to face your own wounds, your own fears, and your own unconscious patterns. Because the less awareness you have, the more likely you are to repeat the past while believing you're experiencing something entirely new. And this is where a life-changing question emerges: if your old wounds no longer guided your choices, how would you choose to love from this day forward? The answer depends on more than simply understanding the shadow. It requires discovering what happens when a person finally begins to become whole. And it is at that moment that Carl Jung's psychology reveals a transformation capable of changing not only your relationships, but the way you see your entire life. If this reflection spoke directly to your heart, leave a comment below with the words, "I embrace my shadow." Sometimes, the first step toward changing your reality is simply to stop running from what already exists within you. This is exactly where the real turning point begins. For a long time, you may have believed that the goal was to find someone who would heal your insecurities, fill the emptiness inside you, or finally prove that you were worthy of love. That idea is deeply rooted in our culture, but it is completely opposite to the path Carl Jung proposed. For Jung, the most important relationship you will ever have is the one you build with yourself. That doesn't mean living in isolation or giving up the desire to share your life with a partner. It means understanding that no healthy relationship can truly flourish when it is born out of the need to complete what is still broken or fragmented within you. That is why Jung spoke of individuation as the process of becoming who you truly are. It requires letting go of your masks, stopping the habit of living only to please others, and no longer shaping your identity around external approval. How many times have you accepted situations that hurt you simply because you were afraid of losing someone? How many times have you silenced your feelings, minimized your dreams, or ignored your own boundaries because you believed that if people saw the real you, they would stop loving you? The persona, another fundamental concept in analytical psychology, explains much of this behavior. It is the social mask we wear to gain acceptance. The problem begins when that mask becomes so heavy that we forget who we are beneath it. Someone who is emotionally whole doesn't need to perform a role in order to earn love. They understand that being authentic may drive away people who are not aligned with their true nature, but it also draws closer those who are capable of building a genuine connection. And that completely changes the dynamics of relationships. Instead of entering a relationship trying to convince someone of your worth, you begin paying attention to whether that person also demonstrates emotional maturity, respect, reciprocity, and a willingness to grow alongside you. The desperate need to be chosen gradually disappears because you no longer measure your value by someone else's decision. This is one of the most transformative effects of genuine personal growth. When you strengthen your self-worth, integrate your shadow, and become aware of your unconscious patterns, something quietly changes in the way you carry yourself. You learn to say no without feeling guilty. You realize that setting healthy boundaries doesn't push healthy love away, it only pushes away the people who depended on your lack of boundaries to remain in your life. You discover that peace is not the same as boredom, respect is not emotional distance, and emotional stability is not the absence of passion. On the contrary, it means that love stops being a battlefield and becomes a place where two people can grow together. Perhaps the greatest transformation is this: you stop chasing people who need to be convinced to stay. Instead, you quickly recognize when genuine reciprocity is present. Not because you've become cold or indifferent, but because you've stopped bargaining away your dignity for emotional breadcrumbs. Jung understood that whatever we transform within ourselves inevitably changes the way we relate to the world around us. When your identity is no longer built on emotional neediness but grounded in awareness, your choices begin to reflect that new reality as well. And this is where many people notice something remarkable. Without trying to appear different, they begin attracting entirely different kinds of relationships, as though an invisible shift within them had quietly transformed everything around them. If this idea resonated with you, leave a comment below with the words, "I choose to become whole." Sometimes, a single decision made within yourself is enough to mark the beginning of an entirely new life. And it is precisely this invisible shift that explains why some people seem to completely transform their love lives without relying on mind games, dating tricks, or strategies designed to keep someone's attention. What truly changed wasn't just their behavior, it was their identity. Carl Jung believed that when a person expands their consciousness, they stop living on autopilot and begin making choices that are aligned with who they truly are. That means a healthy relationship is no longer a desperate goal to chase but a natural outcome of personal growth. There is a profound difference between looking for someone to fill an inner void and sharing your life with someone after you've already found a sense of wholeness within yourself. That difference may seem subtle, but it changes everything. Those who are trying to fill an emotional void often ignore obvious signs of incompatibility, tolerate disrespect out of fear of being alone, and make compromises that gradually erode their self-worth. By contrast, someone who has developed a healthy relationship with themselves understands that their inner peace is far too valuable to trade for just anyone's company. That doesn't mean building emotional walls or believing you don't need anyone. It simply means that love no longer comes from emptiness. It comes from conscious choice. Perhaps you've met someone who radiated a sense of calm that was difficult to explain. People like that rarely compete for attention or beg to be noticed. They don't feel the need to constantly prove they deserve love because their identity is no longer built on external validation. That quiet confidence is the result of a long inner journey, and Jung would describe it as moving closer to the self, the organizing center of the personality, where the different parts of the psyche begin to find harmony. The closer you live to that center, the less need you feel to wear masks, chase approval, or repeat unconscious patterns. That is why true power in relationships doesn't come from convincing someone to stay. It comes from developing the discernment to recognize who is genuinely capable of walking beside you. As your awareness grows, you begin to notice behaviors that you once romanticized. You no longer mistake intensity for love, dependence for connection, or suffering for emotional depth. You come to understand that reciprocity is not a rare privilege, it is one of the essential foundations of any lasting relationship. And above all, you discover that loving someone should never require abandoning your true self. There is a quote often attributed to Jung that captures this transformation beautifully: "Who looks outside, dreams, who looks inside, awakens." Perhaps that awakening is the greatest gift you can give yourself. Because when you stop endlessly searching for the perfect person, you finally begin becoming the person you were always meant to be. And it's remarkable to realize that, at that very moment, the way you see love, other people, and even your own destiny begins to change so profoundly that what once seemed impossible starts to feel genuinely attainable, opening the door to an even deeper understanding of why the relationships that truly transform our lives always begin long before the very first meeting. If this message resonated with you, leave a comment below with the words, "I awaken to who I truly am." Sometimes, one conscious decision is all it takes to begin the story you've been waiting to live for so long. If you've made it this far, it probably wasn't by chance. Perhaps something in this message awakened a part of you that had been dormant for a long time. Maybe you recognized patterns you had never noticed before, or perhaps, for the first time in a long while, you felt that there really is a different path toward building a healthy, mutual, and lasting relationship. If that's what happened, don't let this reflection end when this video does. Let it be the beginning of a genuine transformation. If you enjoy content about Carl Jung's psychology, personal growth, self-discovery, conscious relationships, and the invisible forces that shape our lives, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Every video here is created with the purpose of helping you better understand your mind, strengthen your identity, and build a more conscious life, one step at a time. I'm confident that the upcoming videos will continue to challenge the way you think and provide practical insights that can transform the way you see yourself and the world around you. I'd really love to hear what this video stirred within you. Let me know in the comments if this message reflects how you feel, or share the moment that resonated with you the most. Your comment may encourage someone else who is going through the very same journey and still believes they're facing it alone. If this message resonated with you, please give this video a like. That simple gesture helps YouTube recommend this message to more people who may be trapped in painful emotional patterns and need to hear exactly what you heard today. And if someone comes to mind while you're watching this, share this video with them. They may be searching for a healthier relationship, or trying to understand why they keep repeating the same emotional patterns. Sometimes, a single message arrives at exactly the right moment and has the power to change a life. And before you go, be sure to watch the next video that's now appearing on your screen. In it, we'll dive even deeper into one of Carl Jung's most transformative concepts and explore how it can completely change the way you see love, other people, and yourself. I have a feeling that after watching this video, the next one will resonate with you even more. I'll see you there.